All right, let's dive straight into this explainer and unpack a massive, honestly pretty mind-blowing shift in how people are viewing their careers. We're looking at a fast-growing movement where everyday folks are completely ditching the traditional 9-to-5 grind, literally decades ahead of schedule. And they aren't doing it with magic or pure luck, they're pulling it off using simple, straightforward math.
Just picture this scenario for a second. What if some of the coworkers sitting next to you right now are quietly planning to literally never work again by the time they hit 35? I know, it sounds totally absurd, right? But here's the secret. They didn't hit the jackpot, and they definitely aren't trust fund babies sitting on inherited cash. They're just everyday people who figured out an equation that most of us are never taught in school.
And look, we're not just talking about some fringe internet trend here. Astonishingly, over 3.5 million Americans are actively following this exact strategy. That is a massive community all zeroed in on one single goal, making work entirely optional, forever, as fast as humanly possible.
So this booming financial movement actually has a name, and it's built on one specific acronym, FIRE. That stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. It is fundamentally rewriting the timeline of the American dream. But to really grasp how people are pulling this off, we've got to look at the math it's all built on. The whole FIRE movement pretty much revolves around one incredibly simple formula. To find your so-called FIRE number, you just take your annual living expenses and multiply them by 25. The big idea here is that once your invested assets hit that specific multiplier, you can basically live off those investments forever, without ever needing a paycheck again.
Now, you might be wondering, why the number 25? Well, it comes from something called the 4% rule, which was born out of a landmark 1994 study called the Trinity Study. That research proved that if your money is invested in a solid mix of stocks and bonds, you can safely withdraw 4% of it every single year indefinitely. And yeah, the data shows that holds up even through severe recessions and massive market crashes.
Let's look at how that actually plays out in real life, because it gives you a totally customized target based strictly on how you spend. Say you live a lifestyle that costs $40,000 a year. Multiply by 25, and your FIRE target is $1 million. But if you want a lifestyle that costs $60,000 a year, you're going to need $1.5 million. It's super simple math, but the results are absolutely life-changing. But here's what's really fascinating. FIRE is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all deal where you have to eat nothing but rice and beans. It basically comes in 3 distinct flavors. First, there's lean FIRE, which is big with minimalists who live super frugally, meaning they spend maybe 25 to 40 grand a year and aim for a portfolio of around 5 to 800,000. On the total opposite side, you have fat FIRE. This is for high earners who still want luxury and travel, meaning they need a portfolio of 2 to 5 million or even more. But then there's this really interesting third option right in the middle. It's called BARISTA FIRE, and it is exploding in popularity right now. Instead of stopping work cold turkey, these folks go into early semi-retirement. They take back their time right away by working a low-stress, part-time job, like pulling espresso shots at a coffee shop or doing some light consulting. That job covers health insurance and gives them some fun money, while their investments quietly handle the heavy lifting, like the mortgage. It is an amazing way to step off the corporate treadmill way before age 65. Okay, all of this builds to what is arguably the most critical relationship in the whole movement, your savings rate versus your years to freedom. Normally, if you save the traditional 10% of your income, you're looking at working for about 43 years. But watch what happens when you ramp that up. Bumping your savings rate to an intentional 30% cuts your working years down to 28. And if you go extreme and save 75%, you literally compress a 40-year career into just 7 years.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the difference between saving 10% and 50% isn't just about hoarding extra money. It is literally 26 years of your life. Aggressively bumping up that savings rate doesn't just put extra digits in your bank account, it actually buys back decades of freedom, decades of health, and time you get to spend with the people you love most.
Right about now, I know exactly what you're probably thinking. It's the biggest dose of natural skepticism this movement gets. Look, there is absolutely no way I can save 50% of my income. I've got bills, I've got rent, I need to buy groceries. It can honestly feel like an impossible leap from where you're starting right now.
But here's the secret. You don't have to go all in on day one. You definitely don't have to start at 50%. Just start at 20%. Then see if you can push it to 25%. Every single 5% increase you can manage actually shaves years off your required working life. The goal here isn't absolute perfection right out of the gate. It's direction. Building the habit is way more important than hitting some extreme target immediately. Okay, so that brings us to the elephant in the room. If you live in the US, leaving a traditional job brings up a completely valid, really scary question. What am I going to do about healthcare? How do you actually survive without employer-sponsored health insurance?
Well, the FIRE community has essentially engineered 4 incredibly practical workarounds for this. Number 1, Affordable Care Act marketplace plans. Number 2, health-sharing ministries. Number 3, like we mentioned earlier, BARISTA FIRE, just working a fun part-time job specifically to get those benefits. And finally, a really cool strategy called geo-arbitrage. That literally just means moving to a country with a much lower cost of living or one that actually offers universal healthcare. The point is, healthcare is a totally solvable hurdle if you plan for it.
But what about the economy? It's terrifying to think about finally quitting your job only for the stock market to just completely tank the next day. A lot of people wonder, if the market crashes after I retire, does this whole system just fall apart?
Actually, the data says no, it doesn't. Remember that 4% rule? It has survived every single major market crash in history. We're talking 1929, the dot-com bubble in 2000, the 2008 financial crisis, all of it. Plus, most FIRE retirees don't just blindly cross their fingers. They keep a very safe buffer of 2 to 3 years worth of living expenses sitting in cash or bonds. So if the market does crash, they just live off the cash and never have to sell their stocks at a loss. It turns market volatility from a financial disaster into a completely manageable risk.
The really empowering thing here is that you absolutely do not need to be a Wall Street expert to pull this off. Let's walk through a concrete, step-by-step ignition plan directly from our source material so you can actually start this journey yourself.
Here is your super actionable roadmap. Step 1, get totally honest and calculate your baseline annual expenses. Step 2, multiply that number by 25 to find your personal FIRE number. Step 3, open up a standard brokerage account. Step 4, set up automated investments into low-cost index funds so compound interest does the heavy lifting for you. And finally, Step 5, aggressively widen the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Just remember, every single dollar you cut from your yearly expenses actually lowers your final savings goal by $25.
At the end of the day, this whole movement completely reframes the conversation around work. The goal isn't to retire and just do nothing. The goal is to retire and be able to do anything. It's not about sitting on a couch for 50 years, you know? It's about achieving absolute, uncompromised freedom of choice over how you spend your days.
Look, the traditional model of working 9 to 5 until you're 65 years old, that was designed back in 1935. And let's be real, the world doesn't look anything like 1935 anymore. What this explainer really shows us is that FIRE is just a highly rational response to a system that wasn't exactly designed to set you free. The math to escape is right there, totally available to you right now. So the only question left is, are you willing to use it, and which flavor of FIRE are you going to go after?